The conditions were miserable, but the Braves pitching staff was anything but a no-hit performance from Ian Anderson, followed by more bullpen domination and a 2-0 win. Most importantly, the Braves are halfway to a championship, winning Game 3 of the World Series Friday night to take a 2-1 series lead. This is battery-powered Cory McCartney along with McAuley and Grant. And what felt like a must-win situation for the Braves, it couldn't have played out much better. This was complete domination with a 2-hit shutout.
Hey, look, they're all must win at this point, right? And the Braves, when their first home win in a World Series game since they clinched in 1995, have to feel pretty good about the results of a night in which the pitching kind of took center stage. We've talked a lot about the Braves offense. We've asked a lot of questions about the Braves pitching staff. And this was a night in which the Braves were able to kind of put everything together. It was just enough offense. It was a lot of pitching. It started with Ian Anderson, who Dusty Baker said after the game was effectively wild. And I was kind of thinking that as well as I was watching the game. He was not living in the strike zone. He threw 76 pitches. Only 20 of them were true strikes, 39 strikes overall, 37 balls. So it was about a 50-50 ratio of being in and around the strike zone, getting swings and misses, and missing the strike zone and having the Astros hitters trying to wait him out. But as they waited and waited, they never really got a chance to truly get Ian Anderson on the ropes and deliver a significant blow. He got through 5 innings of no-hit ball. The Braves bullpen came in and did a masterful job once again. And you had the guys you wanted out of the bullpen as well. You had A.J. Minter. You had Luke Jackson. You had Tyler Matzek. And you had Will Smith gassed up and ready to go. Matzek, after the game, told Ken Rosenthal he calls it the night shift, and they're ready to go, and they'll be ready again in Game 4. But it was a tremendous team victory and a little late insurance from Travis d'Arnaud, who was behind the plate for all that great pitching and right in the middle of the Braves run scoring and just giving them that little bit of breathing room that you like to have in the 9th inning so that Will Smith had a chance to go out there and maybe not be quite as tight as you can be in a 1-0 World Series game in which you've thrown a one-hitter to that point.
So let's set the stage first for Ian Anderson here. Obviously, no Charlie Morton. Max Fried's start was dropped. 2 bullpen games looming. The Braves really needed him to come through. Becomes the second rookie in World Series history with at least 5 no-hit frames, joining Jess Tessero from 1912. Dropped his postseason ERA to 1.26, 4th all-time. Christy Mathewson, Orlando Hernandez, Cliff Lee, the only guys who have been lower than Ian Anderson at this point in his career. The vaunted changeup was on. I mean, he got 9 of his outs that way. Threw just 74 pitches. You mentioned, the strike ratio there, but the decision is going to be second guessed and will continue to be second guessed. Brian Snitker opted to pull him after 5 innings. Graham, where were you at on pulling Ian Anderson? Obviously, you had all the guys that you needed. And Brian Snitker said afterwards this was a gut thing for him. He had all the guys that he needed rested in that bullpen, ready to go, gassed up, as you said. But certainly that's a decision to pull a 23-year-old who's working on a no-hitter on the biggest stage, as big a stage as it gets, to remove him after 5 innings.
Yeah, but look, I mean, Brian Snitker said this after the game, and we'll get to the decision to pull Ian Anderson, but I think every person in that ballpark was very well aware Ian Anderson was not going to throw a 9-inning no-hitter. It wasn't really lining up that way. He wasn't going to get through 4 innings as he was approaching 80 pitches already. That was just an impracticality. And while I would love to see the Braves have thrown a combined no-hitter, and that did not happen, a play that could have been made in left field and then a line drive single the opposite way. Nice job of hitting by Bregman were just the 2 hits that were allowed. The Astros offense was not able to find the answers to this Braves bullpen. But when it goes back to Ian Anderson, I know Brian Snitker said that he was using his eyes and he just made a gut call about pulling Ian at that point. But I also think that this is a lot of the stuff we talk about. When you leave a pitcher in there too long, that 3rd time through the order, are they going to actually get the better looks now that they've been, I would say, close? They worked Ian Anderson over just a little bit. They weren't all bad at bats by the Astros, but they weren't able to make significant contact, at least not that didn't go right to a Braves defender. And it's quite obvious if you're throwing a no-hitter through 5 innings, you're doing more things right than you're doing wrong. But I wouldn't say that this was that dominant, masterful performance where you were sitting there with 10 or 11 strikeouts through 5 innings and thinking this is his night. You just don't touch him until you absolutely have to. I think Ian did everything he needed to do. And while some people might have liked to see him squeeze the 6th inning out of him, I think you can look at it right now and say, this was the right decision. You got the 4 guys in there to perform the way that they needed to. And I don't think you can afford to think about Game 4 and Game 5 and think, hey, 1 inning of Ian Anderson is the thing that's going to keep us from being able to cover those innings. You were going to have a plan already for this night. And I think if that plan included Ian Anderson, 5 strong innings, then you'll be happy with that plan and you'll use the guys you need to win that day. Like you said, they're all must win at this point. And I think that Brian Snitker did what he had to do to win game 3. And now you move on to game 4 and figure it out.
Well, it wasn't all based, obviously, on analytics. As we mentioned, Snit said he was doing a lot of this by his gut, but he had thrown 33 pitches against the Astros' top 3 batters, and those same hitters, Jose Altuve, Michael Brantley, and Alex Bregman. That's what awaited him in the 6th inning. So, I understand that, and obviously Snitker said afterward this could have backfired. This is what I don't like about it, right? I mean, this is obviously the way that games are being managed in this era in October. But, letting him go back there, a 23-year-old, obviously, Snicker said, and you mentioned it as well, that he wasn't going to get the complete game if this was going to be a no-hitter. It was going to be a combined no-hitter. But I think about Blake Snell being pulled before the 3rd time through. And, there's just been 2 complete games in the World Series in the last 12 years. Obviously, legends are made in October. That's the pun. That's the cliche. But it's real. It just feels like we've obviously gone the wayside there when it comes to starting pitching. I know he wasn't going to throw the complete game, but certainly there's, how many opportunities is Ian Anderson going to get, to have this kind of a performance on this kind of a stage? But certainly, the big bats were looming, and Brian Snitker got to that bullpen. And that bullpen was largely brilliant yet again. AJ Minter allows 1 base runner, hitting Bregman. Luke Jackson retires the Astros in order in the 7th. Tyler Maxey comes in the 8th. Last pitch, by the way, just a shade under 100 miles an hour. Will Smith seals the deal. We can debate, the no-hitter coming to an end on the Aledmys Diaz hit that probably could have been caught and probably should have been caught. But certainly they had the guys they wanted. The thing I wonder, though, after this is you've looked at now, and we always talk about in the postseason managing for today, and you worry about tomorrow. But there are at least 2 more tomorrows, and they're consecutive tomorrows. How much do you think using all 4 of your high leverage arms with those 2 games looming, 2 bullpen games looming, could be an effect? Could be something that comes afterwards. We're going to have to look at a residual effect. But certainly that's a byproduct of pulling Ian Anderson and not giving him that additional in.
Well, let me just throw a couple of things out there. Blake Snell in the World Series in 2020 was truly locked in. That was a head-scratching decision that it rightfully so was going to be second-guessed and will be for a long time. And there's no 2 ways about that. I didn't agree with that call last year, but Ian Anderson was not having that exact kind of performance. I just don't think that even though, a runner gets on and it's a 1-0 ball game, that you're going to be overly concerned if it was the way Blake Snell was throwing last year. But with Ian Anderson going that 3rd time through the order with these very experienced and very talented top of the order the Astros have, that's been battle tested time and again, that has this experience. And I know that we've talked a lot about Ian Anderson coming up on the big stage and throwing some big games. I don't think that throwing just the 5 innings takes anything away from that. And having the kind of weapons the Braves do, you really don't want to see him go back out there for a 3rd time through the order, immediately get in trouble with, say, a bloop and a blast there in the 6th inning, and then think, oh, well, we could have gone to AJ Minter or Luke Jackson or Tyler Matzek or eventually Will Smith to close this game out. Then you're playing the kind of game of what if that you don't want to be. And I just don't think that another 3 outs, 4 outs, maybe even just a couple of outs of Ian Anderson was going to take the strain off the bullpen. The big loss in this series is Charlie Morton. That's the big thing that the Braves are going to have to overcome. Getting another inning or so out of Ian Anderson, maybe, I think, best case scenario, he tries to tiptoe into the 7th inning. But I'm just not sure based on the pitch count he's going to make it much further than that. So I could go on and on and on and kind of talk circles around this thing. But the bottom line is it worked out. I do think that Brian Snitker looked at it and said, I think he's given us everything he can. It's gone better than we could have asked for. And we have the guys that can close this thing down. And at this time of the year, in 2021 baseball, and really in baseball for the last 10 or 15 years, you've specialized your bullpens to come in and put out fires or keep any fires from starting. And the Braves needed to go to the formula that has worked for them throughout the playoffs. I think that a lot of second guessing would have gone into Ian Anderson if he were to have gotten roughed up in that 6th inning. Then I think you just kind of have to sit there and say, what if we'd used this great bullpen that we have after having significant rest for all those guys because they didn't pitch in game 2 and they got the off day. I think they're going to be fine. I'm not saying they're going to be perfect. We all know that. There's a lot that goes into trying to make these decisions. And a big part of it, obviously, is implied that this guy's going to come in and get the outs I need to when I make that call on that bullpen phone and that door swings open. But the Braves bullpen has been doing that time and time again. I think you have to lean on that, and I think you had to go with it, and I think Brian Snitker made the right decision.
AJ Minter threw 17 pitches, Luke Jackson threw 11, Matzik 15, and Will Smith 14. It's not just those pitches too. Obviously, it's the getting up, and it's going to be, getting yourself ready for that opportunity. To me, if you would have given Anderson 1 to 2 batters, and let's see how this next inning rolls, then you can maybe bring somebody in, and you're maybe lessening those pitch counts. I just think you're going to need those two. You're going to need those 4 guys over these next 2 games, and I think if you could potentially have used 3 of them, if maybe have used 2 of them. I think certainly that would have put you in a much better situation, because we have no idea how these next 2 games are going to play out from a pitching standpoint for the Braves. The Astros are going to be in a much better position. They're going to be able to use Framber Valdez, again in this series, and the Braves obviously don't have a game 1 starter to go back to. So to me, if I'm in that manager seat, I'm at least giving him an opportunity, but I'm not a major league manager. But certainly, they got the job done. As you mentioned, these have been the guys that have gotten the job done, across this postseason for them. To me, it's about, what you potentially need from them the next 2 days.
Yeah, and I get that, and there's no discounting that. But again, I just go back to the fact that they're going to have to deal with life without Charlie Morton regardless. And I just don't think that one more inning being asked for out of this bullpen was going to put them in a hole the next couple of days. And the other thing with Ian Anderson that I think is just worth bringing up, if the Braves were up 5-0, we're not having this conversation, I don't think. Ian Anderson would have gone back out there for the 6th inning. If he did well there, then maybe he's, as you said, on a batter-to-batter, try to figure out if we can piecemeal it together. But it was a 1-0 game, and you have that kind of bullpen that has performed in a way that, and we've talked a lot about the Braves bullpen over the years that we've known each other, Corey, and I don't know if I've had this kind of confidence in a group, and we haven't seen them get this far. And the reason why I think we're talking about the Braves in the World Series is that this bullpen has answered the call time and again and delivered way more times than not. And I just don't want to see that scale of balance tip over just one more inning of Ian Anderson, or he gets in trouble and all of a sudden you're playing from behind, and a game that you felt like maybe you had a chance to win at home and take a lead in the series and set the tone that you wanted to, just slips away, slips through your fingers. So as we do, we manage everything in hindsight from your chair and my chair. We're not major league managers, but I have a hard time picking it apart too much because it did work. And I don't think that it overtaxed the bullpen. If it had gone into extras and they'd had to play 15 innings tied 1-1, we'd be having a totally different conversation at this point. But I do think that it worked. And I think that a lot of things went into it, even if at that moment, Brian Snitker was going off of instinct and just trying to make the best call he could. Again, when it works out, I think we just have to kind of check that box and move on to the next couple of days, which, as you pointed out, will definitely be a challenge as you try to deal with back-to-back bullpen games, and you can't go back to your game 1 starter because he's not available.
The bullpen, I think, is ultimately going to have its say in the World Series MVP should the Braves pull this thing out. But, man, Travis d'Arnaud is making quite the case at this point. He doubled in the 2nd, then added a monster insurance run on the bottom of the 8th, 112.6 miles an hour off the bat, 437 feet for that home run. He hit 167 in the LDS, 211 in the LCS. He's now 5 for 12 in the World Series, home runs in back-to-back games. He mentioned afterwards that the legs are finally back. And I think we forget sometimes he missed 67 games. He's the only Braves hitter in this World Series hitting above 273. He's one of only 2 with an OPS above 657. Jorge Soler is the other one. Some key bats have been struggling in the series so far. Dansby Swanson, Adam Duvall, Jock Peterson and his opportunities. They needed somebody to step up, Grant, and Travis d'Arnaud has absolutely been that guy.
Yeah, most definitely. And the World Series, you can find unlikely heroes. And you could go all the way back to the first time we saw the Atlanta Braves reach the World Series and the performance of second baseman Mark Lemke, of all people, hitting .417 in that series and having a serious stake had the Braves won it in being the World Series MVP. But lest we get into things that we can figure out when the series is over, you will take what you can get from anybody you can get it from. And October does have this aura of being able to make these brand new heroes and legends, if you will, at least as far as postseason is concerned. And sometimes it comes from the unlikeliest of places. For d'Arnaud missing, 90 days or so in the middle of the season, that's not ideal whatsoever. He had to deal with, I think, getting himself back into some kind of rhythm with a bad hand that you didn't have the full time to both rehab and rest and come back and reset. You're jumping in late. It's like taking a test you haven't studied for is kind of what I would liken it to. Only it's a physical test in the most physical position that you can play in the game of Major League Baseball. He's had to handle this staff And as you can see on the bat that Travis d'Arnaud has been using by and large for at least the last few weeks, he has it taped up in a special spot between his hands. And I was just kind of wondering, how much is this guy gutting through? I knew it had to be a lot. I knew he probably wasn't anywhere close to where he would like to be in terms of having an uninterrupted season. But man, that home run, it was a laser beam. And I do think that it was a huge shot of confidence for Braves fans, for that dugout, and of course for Will Smith when he came in and was able to get the Astros and seal the deal, as you said, and close out that game. d'Arnaud is doing something that the Braves need, and that's coming through with some timely hits. He's also leading that pitching staff behind the plate, and he's done a nice job so far. But yeah, the offense is going to have to wake up. It was miserable conditions for hitting. I can't imagine it was that much fun to pitch either in Game 3 in the mist for most of the night, but I wouldn't say it was exactly a hitter's paradise in terms of the weather, and it could be that way again in Game 4. We'll see how that all plays out, but this Braves offense can be sudden, as we've talked about many times, and they could use a sudden and big inning, maybe a few big innings, in order to get Game 4 where they want to, as they, again, try to navigate through the next couple of games without being able to go back to their Game 1 starter and asking the bullpen to do more than it's done, even to this point in the entire run through the postseason. Some big games lay ahead. Every game is the biggest game you're playing. They're all must win, but the Braves, with this series lead, have to feel like, okay, we can piece this thing together. We're going to find what we need to. And some unsung heroes or some guys who may have played second fiddle or third fiddle. I don't know how many fiddles you have in this orchestra, but regardless, Travis d'Arnaud got his solo, if you will, with that home run in the ninth or in the eighth inning to help the Braves take a 2-0 lead into the ninth and slam the door.
Yeah, he said afterwards that he's using one of Jock Peterson's bats. So I don't know. Jock Peterson's using Anthony Rizzo's bat. So is Travis d'Arnaud actually using Jock Peterson's bat, or is he using Anthony Rizzo's bat? So I don't want to make anybody's head hurt, but just try to figure out whose bat he's actually using. It's not his bat. That's certainly the case. But as we look ahead to Game 4, Dusty Baker said Zach Greinke is going to start things off for them. He's not sure how long he can go. He's not sure what he's going to be able to provide, but they're going to be looking for this veteran. We can have a debate much later whether or not Zach Greinke is bound for Cooperstown, but certainly he is not the same guy that we saw when a Cy Young that was dominant for the Dodgers. But the flip side of it, the Braves have a lot of options in terms of how they're going to handle these next two. Or at least we know how the Astros are going to set things up. What's the biggest key for you when you look at how, the Braves are going to be pitching these next two games?
Well, the big thing is trying to get the outs any which way you can, and they're going to have to go with an approach that's asking some guys who are perhaps a little less proven, not only in the month of October, but perhaps even in their big league careers, to come in and potentially play a role. There are some arms that the Braves have that they can use to cover some innings. Do you think that they're the right matchup for the Houston Astros, though? That's a question that Brian Snitker is going to have to ask as he tries to do that. Now, I will say this, having more offense going will obviously make this job a little bit more palatable and give these relievers a little bit of breathing room, perhaps a lot of breathing room if things go well. But you've got to figure out who can get you through the first couple of innings. Then maybe you figure out, as we've seen, who can come in and throw you perhaps 6, 7, 8 or more outs. The Braves have some guys that could do that. We've seen Drew Smyly pitch in this series. He didn't have a great outing, but it wasn't a complete disaster. We also saw Kyle Wright come in Game 2 and look about as good as he could possibly look. Again, it's one inning. I'm not saying let's start carving the plaque in the Braves Hall of Fame for Kyle just yet, but this is somebody that you may have to call on to pitch the biggest innings of his life. And it's nice that he's already gotten through the orientation by getting into a World Series game. You've also got Tucker Davidson, who did not pitch in the big leagues after the middle of June, but was able to get himself rehabbed and all the way back from his forearm injury and pitch in Gwinnett on the final day of the season and work himself out and stay at least ready as an option for the Braves. And his number may be called as well in these next couple of games. I think that we'll figure out Game 5 once you have gotten through Game 4. But as I said back in the Dodgers series and maybe even back in the Brewers series, at this point for the Braves now, it's all hands on deck, and you got to get everybody out there and figure out who matches up well. And then you're going to be leaning on that big four in the back end of the bullpen. Find a way to get through 5 or 6 innings and give those guys a chance to pitch with leads. And I think the Braves are going to be where they want to be. But that also implies actually explicitly saying they need to get those leads and have it there and ready for the Braves bullpen to come in and hopefully do what it's done so well all October.
Yeah, I certainly think Kyle Wright and Tucker Davidson have a lot to say in terms of being bulk guys over these next two games. Davidson said that he's stretched out around north of 70 pitches, so he could be
Yeah.
big. Zach Greinke got roughed up in the ALCS, by the way, just a little over an inning against the Red Sox. And before that game, he said he felt like he was stretched out to only 40 pitches. So I don't know how much more they're going to be able to get than maybe 40, 50 pitches from Zach Greinke. Of course, he's not looking ahead. And this will be the last time Zach Greinke potentially pitches in a long time. So, certainly they're going to try to get everything they can out of him and try to set that bullpen up for some success. So an interesting matchup, certainly, as we head into game 4. But the Braves 6-0 at home, halfway to a championship. They keep that coming. They could be setting a parade route very, very soon. And we'll have you covered here on Battery Power. So make sure you subscribe to the Talking Chop YouTube channel. Also, make sure you turn on those notifications so you get an alert every time that we drop a new episode. I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley. We appreciate you watching, and we'll see you in next time, Braves Country.